Hi, and welcome to Kay Let's Talk, the podcast where we break down storytelling across books, television, and film with a special love for book-to-screen adaptation. Here, we talk about craft, character arcs, structure, dialogue, visual language, and the creative choices that shape how a story lands. If you like thoughtful conversational deep dives into the stories you can't stop thinking about, you're in the right place. Let's talk. This episode will include spoilers for Season 2 of Heated Rivalry and The Long Game. Hello everyone and welcome back to the podcast. Today we are going to be recording a part 3 of my Q&A series with 2 questions that came up multiple times in my DMs that I felt needed more time to elaborate upon, and I also wanted to bring in my friend Lo to help me answer them. So this is Lo. As I've mentioned before, we are writing a novel series together, and she is my creative partner for many projects. We met in college when she started managing our hockey team and joined with next to no knowledge of the sport. She majored in English and anthropology and wrote her thesis on hockey culture after 3 years as a part of our team. And I'm excited to have Lo's perspective because she is someone who came into hockey as an adult with an outside perspective, where most hockey players are born into the sport and the culture that comes with it. Her time on our team allowed her to be immersed in hockey culture firsthand. She was in the locker room with us at team meals and even moved in with us every year during our 6-week winter break. But she also can do a little translating for us as someone who has a unique relationship with the sport, having not played but been on a team. So this is Lo.
Thanks, Kay. Just to give everyone an idea of what I was working with when I joined the team, it was game day. Our coach was showing me how to code game tape on the laptop, and I had to ask her what a penalty kill was. So somehow it did not come up in the interview, thank God, because I had the time of my life, filling your water bottles and sometimes recording your games. I would say it was a 50-50 shot that it got recorded. So there's hope for anyone listening who wants to learn about hockey.
Yes. So these questions were ones that Lo and I actually discussed in pretty great length outside of me being asked them for the Q&A. So I wanted to make sure that when I was covering them, I included her because we touched on so many really good points when we were discussing it outside of recording a podcast. So the first one, the question is, in general, why do you think the TV show changed it so that Shane and Ilia did not hook up again for years between the All-Star game and before the Olympics? Since in the books, they are hooking up pretty much nonstop once they start. So we have differing ideas about why this show change was made. I think I'm taking a more diplomatic view, and my argument is more because of budget constraints or logistics of shooting. But I also have some insight into maybe why Jacob would have wanted to age the characters up for the kind of greater conversation about their relationship. And I don't know if I've convinced Lo of that argument.
Here's the deal. You make great points. I still reject the principle because I just like the idea better that they're hooking up nonstop, and it makes a lot more sense why they're willing to risk things for each other and have such an attachment when the frequency of their interactions is more prevalent. I think you make a lot of sense, and I can totally see the benefits. However, when I am watching it and they are so into each other and then 3 seasons go by before their next interaction for no good reason, give me a goddamn break. It's now occurring to me also that you are much more proper than me, and I am gonna probably let some swear words
You
slip.
can do that.
Well,
I just have to label the episode as explicit.
Getting an E rating. Okay.
Swear away, Lord.
Sorry in advance.
Swear away. Okay. My argument for why they would have done it this way is they are so young when we meet them, and by aging them up and having them be older when they choose to have sex for the first time, it puts them on a more equal footing where we can see Shane actively choosing to say no to Ilia for those 2 years, and then they both consciously make the decision to come together in that way at that time. And you and I both touched on how the dysfunction hits them differently when they're older. Whereas in the book, it very much feels like Shane goes along with the status quo, which is that Ilia very much initiates all of their hookups first, and he's the one driving the train and like pushing forward and constantly reaching out to arrange the hookups, whereas Shane is still in his internal world trying to resist it very heavily, but he can't resist it because he doesn't have that, I think, confidence yet or maturity yet or greater understanding of what he actually wants. He's just basing his caving in off of what feels good in the moment, and then he feels guilty about it afterwards. So as the show depicts it, we actually get to see Shane have a backbone and resist him, and he's deciding that even though he is capable of resisting him, he doesn't want to anymore.
And I will say that is your strongest point. And I totally see the value in that, especially when we have talked about normal people and comparing them. And in normal people, the two characters are together from high school on in some form and are totally emotionally dependent on each other. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really important that these two characters are really fully actualized people that have their own lives and develop their identities as teammates and players in the league without each other, mm-hmm. despite the like rivalry that's going on.
Yeah.
So I do understand that, the value in that. However, I think that Shane could have done that in one season of resisting and proving it to himself. And I also think that Hudson has said that Shane has had sexual experiences before Ilia, but it's the first time that he wants to be there. Mm-hmm. And so I just don't think that he is going to experience that and then say no to it. I think that he is desperate to have experiences that make him feel like he can relate to other people in the room, on the team. And I don't think that he would resist it for 3 years. And I wouldn't want him to. I want them to enjoy each other.
I do feel like having him resist him, though, is in a way serving two functions, because I think it shows that Shane has the discipline that the show is really trying to hammer home. Mm-hmm. So it's another way to make that abundantly clear that when Shane wants to be disciplined, he is very good at it. Because I think in the book it's a little more implied, not shown in any other way. It's more of like a statement. And then the show has to find a way to showcase that. So you could argue that this would be a way of showcasing that. I also think that for Shane's character, so much of his actions are rooted in his feelings of shame about the whole thing. And that's something that takes him almost all the way up until the finale to really kind of fully grapple with. And something I mentioned to you was that he gives in not because of a conclusion he comes to. It's more of a acceptance of the fact that having Ilia in any capacity for a couple of hours multiple times a year is still worth the shame and pain that comes after it. And to me, that's really telling that he put himself in a position where he would experience life knowing that that was an option, and then removing it as an option for himself, and then realizing that it's not better without the hookups with Ilia, even though he knows that hooking up with Ilia is going to make him feel so shameful afterwards. So to me, it's like a really hammering home that his life is quite sad internally. Like he's, I don't know, just accepting of the fact that like I'm going to feel like shit with or without him prevalent, there to hook up with.
And I don't think that Shane thinks that his life is sad, but I think that he probably feels lonely when he's at Hayden's house with his
family
army of rugrats and is just an add-on. So I think he probably decides that he'd rather not be lonely. And I think that that's a great point. However, I'm watching it and I want them to be hooking up, so I don't know. They're two teen boys, like I just don't see. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's literally like Ilia offering to be like delivered to his door, and he's gonna say no for 3 years. I don't know. I'm following my heart there.
Do you think that we had talked about how in the earlier episodes the order of events is moved around so much that it's hard for you to even compare the two mediums, because the timing of when they hook up in the book and then all of the subsequent hookups that they do have in the book that we are missing from the show are rearranged so heavily that you wouldn't be able to like one for one represent it accurately anyway.
100%. I think they're two entirely different pieces of art. Normally with an adaptation, you do want it to follow so closely and represent it, and normally when it diverges, it's just missing something. And here they make decisions for the sake of telling the story, and it doesn't feel like anything's missing, I guess is the difference. Like, it's not like, to your point, there's so many changes that you can't compare them, and they're apples and oranges, whereas normally you can compare and you can just see where something could be and it's not.
Yeah. Do you also feel like, I found that having the first time that they have sex with one another be after that long of a wait and the anticipation of it, and the fact that prior to when they originally planned to have sex for the first time, it was like a near miss situation with the snowstorm. And then I want to have more context as to why they didn't reschedule after that, because that's the piece that I wish there was more of an explanation on. It just kind of seems like the one time they had planned to do that, it didn't work out, and then did both of them get cold feet and not re-engage? But then you make the argument of all the text messages in the montage that Ilia is sending where he's trying to re-engage. And Shane, I think, in my head, gets spooked. It's like the snowstorm gave him that, like, slap back into reality that he had been denying himself, and he's so literal that he probably felt like, maybe it's a good thing that happened, because we really shouldn't be doing this. Because the whole time in the book, he's thinking to himself, we really shouldn't be doing this. And he only does it because the opportunity presents itself. So then when the opportunity is removed, he can actually make the decision, we're not doing this.
Yeah, I think he makes the decision that he's going to hook up with Ilia in 3 weeks when he's under Ilia. And so when that decision is negated and he has to make it when he is Shane Hollander and Yuna's texting him and he's, being Shane Hollander, then it's a lot harder for him to make that decision. Yeah, but the idea that two teen boys go from, I'm going to see you in 3 weeks and have sex with you, to 3 seasons is outrageous to me. However, I will cross, party lines to say that the device of Ilia texting him for that long when he has such a reputation as a womanizer and an instigator, I think that persistence proves something to Shane, that he is not the toy of the day or something, and that it demonstrates
he has genuine interest in him.
Yeah, because Ilia is certainly hard to read for Shane, and probably for people in general, because he doesn't get serious. But I think that persistence is a great way to demonstrate it.
Do you think that because there's that long gap, and also, to your point, Ilia persisting for that long, when I read the actual scene in the book where they have sex for the first time, the show, because they've done this, makes that scene so much more emotional, and then the music adds on top of that, and then the added scene in the stairway adds on top of that. And to me, that's another reason why they would have changed it, so that the structure of that scene and the significance of it in the overarching story, the timeline of their story together, it feels like a very big pillar that in the book isn't as big of a pillar because it doesn't have that emotional weight. And if I'm Jacob and I'm trying to create story beats in the whole of the story, episode 2 has to function in some way as the bedrock of their foundation, because episodes 1 and 2 are very much setting the stage for 4, 5, 6. I don't think you can create that without having the first time they sleep together be a more emotional moment than it was written in the book.
Quality over quantity is what we're shooting for in the TV show, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think if they had 8, 10, dare I hope 12 episodes, then they probably would have been hooking up that whole time, because they would have had the time and space to show that. And I think that the value in that comes up again later, we'll talk about in another montage. But I guess I attribute a lot of it to how many episodes they had and how much time and money they had. And so for me, I think if they had the choice, then they probably would be hooking up the whole time, and so they probably should be hooking up the whole time. And I'm gonna die on that hill.
And you're allowed to die on that hill. Okay, the next question is, between the end of episode 2 in Vegas and the Tuna Melt scene, it really feels like there's a huge page turned for Ilia. He goes from being extremely guarded and unable to connect with Shane in Vegas to actively trying to deepen his connection with Shane at his home. I know there's a montage at the beginning of episode 4 that is meant to bridge this gap for us as viewers. Why did Jacob not take the opportunity to include a scene to help us see how and why Ilia's approach to his relationship to Shane changed so dramatically between these two scenes? And I am still not sure what happened for him to decide to plan this elaborate day to grow closer to him. Would love to hear you talk more about this. I have talked about the Tuna Melt scene from multiple angles in my deep dive of the episode and the scenes, and then also in previous Q&A parts. So a lot of this I've touched on indirectly, but I wanted Lo to have a say in this too, because I think she brings some interesting points to the table that I had not thought about. Mainly that we both are really adamant that if you haven't read the scene from Vegas in Ilia's point of view that's on Rachel Reed's website, it's really hard for you to get any sort of sense of Ilia's motivation going into Tuna Melt, clearly. Mm-hmm. It's almost impossible because the way he's written in the book version and shown in the show withholds so much of his emotions. And that's on purpose because he is doing that actively in the passage from Rachel Reed's website as well. So without that added context, it would be near impossible to get any sort of insight into how Ilia actually is feeling in the Vegas scene, because it feels like he's being extremely guarded and unable to connect with Shane, but that's by design. And that changes a lot when you know that he's fighting for his life to be that way.
Absolutely. And just because we mentioned it a little bit in passing here, there is a deleted scene on Rachel Reed's website of Las Vegas. I call it the "we didn't even kiss" scene because there's a couple Vegas scenes. And the TLDR of that is that the entire time that they're at the award show and presenting the award, Ilia is just desperately trying to hold himself together because he just wants to wrap Shane up in his arms and emotionally fall apart with him. Mm-hmm. And so when they are supposed to be on presenting the awards and Shane says, "Where were you? Who were you busy with?" Actually, Ilia was in, if you are combining the book and the show, Ilia was in the very bathroom that they go to later, having a panic attack because he had seen Shane and Shane looked so good and he wants Shane so much. Later, when he doesn't get up to say goodbye to Shane in the hotel room, it's because he knows if he gets up, he's going to fall apart saying goodbye to Shane, and he doesn't want to do that. And we didn't even kiss. In Ilia's perspective, they don't kiss because he knows that if he starts kissing him, all he's going to want to do is kiss him and never stop and fall apart in his arms. So there's a theme here that Ilia is so emotionally raw and attached to Shane that he's, with every fiber of his being, just trying to hold it in during that whole interaction. And so he comes off incredibly cold, and the complete opposite is that he's probably more attached to Shane
than Shane is to him at that point. Yep, 100%. So when we leave the Vegas scene, and it ends very much catering to Shane's emotions, I would say, because everyone talks about the "we didn't even kiss" portion, and not a lot of people hanker in on Ilia sitting in that bed with the cigarette in his mouth, completely dissociating, and how he's frozen there. I think people remember the "we didn't even kiss" part of it because that's what it ends on, and fail to register that Ilia's just as upset as Shane in that moment.
Yes, I also want to back up and say and this is why I call it the "we didn't even kiss," because the Vegas rooftop is an entirely different scene from years before. Yeah. So, or a year before, or something. Yeah. It's from before.
A year.
My point is, strike it from the record, and that's why we call it "we didn't even kiss" scene. But if we're going back there, and we're talking about who's more attached emotionally, even then, Ilia is up on that roof, and he says, he kind of caves and tells Shane why he's upset. He's going home in 3 days. But Shane doesn't catch that he's caving and telling him why he's upset. He thinks he's just randomly starting conversation. And so he says, "That's nice," and tanks that opportunity for connection. But even then, Ilia is upset about something and willing to confide in Shane.
Mm-hmm.
And
so he's not always as closed off as people think he is.
Correct.
Shane just also can't pick up on his bids for connection.
Right. And then bringing us back to the original question about Tuna Melt. So if you go back to Vegas, we didn't even kiss, and then it's not really a jump. It's that he wants to connect with Shane. He wants to fall apart with Shane in Vegas. He's holding himself together with every fiber of his being to not do that to Shane. And then the montage happens of them hooking up consistently for a while. And I think during that time, he lulls himself into thinking that he can interact with Shane intimately without it being a threat, because the whole reason he won't fall apart with Shane is that that's like emotional danger to be vulnerable to someone. Mm-hmm. And so I think that during that montage, it is him lulling himself into being like, this is okay, like we can do this. And then because he's lulled into that sense of security, he's like, we can do this, and maybe I can even want a little more, and I can do a little more, and maybe he won't notice that this relationship is deepening if I don't call it out directly.
Yeah.
And so I think the first part of the question about what changes, I think Ilia wants the Tuna Melts in Vegas.
Yeah.
And that is why he is trying to just hold himself together. He's not even thinking about how he's coming across to Shane. And so nothing changes is the short version of that answer. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's just that with time and frequent interactions, he lulls himself into thinking it's okay to want more and to maybe even act on wanting more. And then Shane rips his heart out and takes it with him when he leaves the Tuna Melt scene. Yeah. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
The second half of this question is asking, why didn't Jacob take an opportunity to include a scene to help us see how and why Ilya's approach to his relationship changed so dramatically? I think, Lo, you kind of touched on that. It's because it didn't change that dramatically. I think that the way that he's conveying in the montage that the two of them are apart but always thinking about each other, that from the time they meet doesn't change. There's really not been a big change in how they feel throughout the whole series. It's more of how much they reveal to one another is what changes.
Correct.
The feelings are always the same. I also think the second part of the question is important, which is I'm still not sure what happened for Ilia to decide to plan this elaborate day to grow closer to Shane. That's something that a lot of people have asked me about, and the long and short of it is the schedule. I think that the two of them are always looking at their phones and looking at the schedule, and without the schedule playing out in the way that it does, I don't think Ilia has previously had an opportunity for him to plan a day like this. And it's because of that he's doing the Tuna Melt scene.
Yeah, and for people that don't understand what we mean with the schedule, games usually happen at night in most professional sports, and in this case it happens in the afternoon, and so that opens up their morning because they're not going to have morning commitments before the game like they normally would.
And the team has traveled to Boston the day before, so Shane is already in the city the day before, whereas sometimes with a team like Montreal and Boston where they're so close together, sometimes the team will fly to the game the day of just because schedule permits, or logistically they had a game the night before, whatever it is the case. So Ilia plans this because he's able to look at that schedule and say, this would be the only time this season, theoretically, where he could stay the night with me.
It's a unique opportunity.
Yes.
So he strikes.
And he takes advantage of it. And I think that Rachel's summary of what Ilia's thinking and feeling, again, is good insight, but it's not surprising because I think Ilia has always been a very calculated person, and we just don't see it because the book is largely in Shane's POV, even though it's in third person. So there are so many scenes where she could go back in and paint a picture of what Ilia was doing prior to Shane arriving to a room, or any of those sort of interactions that they have where he could have been planning things in the same way that he does in Tuna Melt. But this is like the one scene that she's kind of peeled the curtain back and confirmed things.
Yeah, and I would say, calling this an elaborate day that he planned, the boy, when he was 18, brought Shane to Toronto for a commercial. So this is nothing for Ilya.
Yeah.
He literally...
It's a great example of what I'm saying. Yeah.
And he is a lot older now. So this isn't very elaborate for him, but it is a unique opportunity for him to do something he's always wanted to do. And the montage that we see of time allows him to develop the confidence that there's just a little bit of a change could work.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think this is a montage of interaction that we could attribute to time and budget too.
Yeah. He does a great job with the montage in the show because of necessity of that being the narrative choice of condensing a lot of things into a montage. But the montages do feel like everything that is shown is so well thought out and calculated that even though we're flying through years, you get a very clear understanding. Like, I like that the montage at the beginning of episode 4, we can see them both losing interest in the things that used to be of interest to them. Particularly with Ilia, we see him partying with Svetlana a lot and hooking up with people over the course of the montage, and slowly he's more and more wrapped up in his phone and less interested in the people around him. So that, we know, is a very big change for the character that's conveyed without words in a very concise way. And then Shane, they use his photo shoots as he's distracted on set and he doesn't look like he wants to be there. And they're also a great narrative device for how his persona in public opinion is so different from who he is as a person, because we now know that he likes ginger ale, but he's doing commercials for orange soda. And those details are, again, really effective of condensing really big topics into visuals and not having to explain them so heavy-handedly.
And then if we are thinking about Ilia in Vegas wanting to connect with Shane, desperately holding himself back, and then Shane crushes him in Tuna Melts when he does let himself want to connect, and then people think that Ilia is really cold at All Star when Shane is trying to reconnect them at post Rose Landry, and he's saying, this isn't a big deal to me, we fuck, it's fine, and it's simple. And I think that is a direct tie to, like, he's basically just back at Vegas, we didn't even kiss, and he let himself hope for more, and Shane crushed him. And so he is essentially saying, like, he's not convinced that Shane's not going to freak out if he admits it's more. And so he's like, you're never going to get me to admit it's more again, because the last time he freaked out, and he doesn't want to lose him completely. And I think in that moment, there's no indication that Shane's not there to end it in the hotel room. Yeah. I think that he is probably trying to protect against that. And
he has that thought in the book, that Shane's coming up to the room to end it, and it makes him nervous before he arrives. I also think it's interesting to think about Ilya's reaction to the Tuna Melt scene and how hurt he is by it. To me, reiterates just how open he is and vulnerable he is in this, because so many people are saying that the way he phrases things in the Tuna Melt scene and the way he roundabout talks about girls is still emotionally distant. But to me, the way that you know that for him he's being extremely vulnerable is because he's not going to be that level of hurt by Shane leaving if not for laying himself bare. And for everybody, laying yourself bare looks so different that it's hard for people to understand that what Ilia is doing equates to that until you see how hurt he is by Shane leaving.
Yeah. And also how many acts of self-soothing he is engaging in the entire time. Like, when he's talking to Shane, he is having to soothe himself. Like, his finger never stops moving around his ear the entire scene.
He's side-eyeing him the whole time, trying to get a read on him on the couch.
And so, to, like, kind of tie up my point about the All-Star hotel room where Shane is trying to talk to him and he is saying it's simple, I think you can draw a direct line through Vegas We Didn't Even Kiss. The whole time he just wants to connect with Shane and be with Shane in whatever way he thinks is allowed. and possible. And at this time, what he thinks is possible is keeping it simple. And so he's going to never give up the party line until, well, anyways, that's a whole other conversation about the rest of that.
That scene in episode 5 is a doozy.
Yeah. But I do think that he tried once in Tuna Melt to go for a little more, and the worst case scenario happened, and he doesn't want it to happen again. And so that's why he is so resistant to admitting anything to Shane about the emotional significance. And he is scared, which makes him terrible too.
Yes, which is such important. I think knowing that line is coming in the next episode is so genius, because it allows you to recontextualize a lot of Ilya's behavior and label it as fear. Whereas initially you don't have that ability to label anything he does as a response to him being so scared. When you know in the book and in the passage from her website that he's terrified. Terrified.
And I think the most obvious moment of that in the All-Star hotel room when he's sitting next to Shane, and Shane really corners him into, if we could be together, and he says, we can't be, and he said, that's not what I asked. And he's fully cornered, and so he whips his head around and says, what does it matter? And Shane flinches, and that is when he's most scared and when he's most terrible.
Yep.
So did we answer everything in that question?
I think so.
Why did Jacob? Okay, and the other thing I'll say is, why did Jacob not take the opportunity? Time and money. I think of everything we could have had is sort of how I think about the montages. Because I would like to have seen a scene where they're just being casual. Like, they're just in the middle of that montage.
It would be a show-only choice, though, because there isn't one in between Tuna Melt and Vegas in the book where he behaves that way. It really is only the Tuna Melt scene where he shifts his behavior. So that would have been Jacob, again, providing more exposition than the book provides if he were to include a scene to bridge that gap. So I would have been interested to see what he would have written for that to accomplish that. But I don't know if Shane and Ilia had a scene where Ilia was behaving adjacent to how he is in Tuna Melt and like dipped his toe in that behavior. I think Shane would have reacted poorly then too, which would have then prevented Tuna Melt from happening. I feel like it's kind of like you have to go all in with it like Ilia did, because he, again, in Vegas, he's too terrified to do it. In Tuna Melt, he does it and then gets recoiled back into himself, and that incites how he responds in episode 5. If you insert another scene in between, I don't think Tuna Melt happens. And if Tuna Melt doesn't happen, then Rose Landry doesn't happen. You know, like, it's such a domino effect that I can understand why Jacob wouldn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole, because how he would have to then rework everything else would potentially be really complicated.
Well, there you go with your logic and reasoning, Kay. Always good for it.
Why, thank you. Okay, the next question is, it was unclear to me if Shane's place in Montreal was actually the investment real estate that it was in the book or not. I feel like that storyline is pretty significant. So,
I concur.
Jacob and Brendan were just on another podcast talking about this exact thing and why it got cut from the show and how they rewrote it in order to kind of still include that storyline, even though they didn't give Shane his own hookup pad like he has in the book. And to me, if we're being pragmatic, it made sense that they put that one on the cutting room floor. But
you would resonate with the pragmatism.
I would, yes. But yeah, so to make it clear, Shane's apartment in the show is meant to be like a hybrid of the book version, where he says to Ilia when they walk inside of it that he owns the unit next door, and eventually he wants to make it into two, like take the two of them and make it into one place. Whereas in the book, he has an entire building that he bought, and he has an apartment upstairs where him and Ilia go to hook up, and then downstairs is like a more commercial space that he rents out. And so that change, Jacob said, was largely due to time and adding another set piece that they didn't really need necessarily to convey the fact that Ilia wants to be in a more personal space of Shane's, and they get that when they go to the cottage. So for him, he was okay with scrapping that and then making this apartment still convey that impersonal feeling by saying things like a designer picked out all the pillows in his room and not having it be reflective of his happy place. And then also insinuating that the place next door to where they are is empty, which is the premise of why he buys a whole building so that nobody can hear them. So it kind of takes the concepts of the hookup building and reinforces them, but keeps the set as one place instead of having them go to two.
Which is very smart for a man with 6 episodes and a limited budget. However, I think the idea that Shane buys an entire building instead of just letting Ilia come to his house speaks volumes. And in this one, he is in his space immediately. And so I think...
Yeah, but he's not, because they put off hooking up for 2 years.
Again, yes, that is true. And that is also very smart of... Isn't that nice how that ties together?
Yes.
That those decisions work.
Yes.
But if we had more budget and time...
Yep.
Then
I think
neither
he would have,
of those decisions would have had to
and
happen.
I think he would have happily included the way it was originally written.
Yes,
but
and has said so.
sacrifices had to be made.
Correct. And so I agree that is pretty significant, and I also agree with their decision to cut it, because I certainly wouldn't have wanted to sacrifice anything else.
Yes.
But for a spoiler alert for the long game, the fact that Shane is willing to buy a building speaks to foreshadowing in the long game that he's so committed to remaining closeted and sticking with the plan and how seriously he takes it.
He does say, though, at the end of the book, Heated Rivalry, that he wants to allow Ilia into all areas of his life now that they've decided, like, that this is what they're going to do. And he does make a point to say, I want you to be at my place in Montreal and have a toothbrush there. Like, he does mention in the book. Yeah. So since we don't have that in the show, it'll be interesting how they use or don't use that concept of wanting to keep Ilia, like, so separate from his personal life, because they really haven't addressed it at all.
Well, maybe Ilia calls some of the pillows, like Lisa's stamp on the impersonal apartment.
Yes. That feeds into this question nicely, though.
Yeah, take it away.
So this question is, I'm curious where you think they will start season 2. Do you think they will pick up right where the book starts? So Lo and I actually had this discussion last night, unprompted by the podcast questions. And I am really not concerned, but there's so much at the end of Heated Rivalry, the book, that they have not included in the ending of season 1, that I really don't think you can start any of the long game plot without. But a lot of it is internal dialogue of Ilia's. So that is the only reason why I think that they might tweak it quite heavily, because how are you going to play out those scenes and convey Ilia's feelings in a way that's readable? And Connor's a great actor, but a lot of it is so internal and very, very important lines that he thinks to himself that I think Jacob's going to want to retool it so that it becomes more obvious. And to me, a lot of how Ilia's inner thoughts in the second book are going to be played out on screen is through his conversations with his therapist, because she's really the only other person that he reveals anything to, because he keeps so much from Shane, and he's doing that at the end of Heated Rivalry as well. So that's an aside. But in the book, it ends with Shane and Ilia going back to the cottage. Shane is freaking out at the house. Ilia has to calm him down. So even after the dinner with his parents, he is still freaking out about the weight of everything that's transpired at that dinner table. And I think that riding off into the sunset is, yes, a beautiful way to end season 1. But I think Hudson had said in an interview that it's not indicative. Yeah, it's not a happy ending. It's not indicative of the reality of what they're about to face. In this bubble that they're in, they're happy, but it's not real. So I think that
it's a moment of reprieve.
Yeah. I think that you have to send them back into that real conversation where they have to confront the fact that Shane's not okay. Ilia's just had the best day of his life, and I think that's important to show too. Like, I think we got the gist of that in how he looks when they're walking back to the car, but he truly in his head is like, this is the best day of my entire life. And so I think it would be kind of a disservice to that whole ending if we don't get a follow-up of like hammering home just how much it meant to Ilia before you skip ahead 2 years to the beginning of the long game. Thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. And I think the conversations for Ilia can also happen with Svetlana now because she's a much more significant character. But I also think there's just too much build up to skip 2 years. Like, no chance. And in the deleted Hayden dinner scene, when does that happen?
It happens, let me look it up.
For those of you who haven't read the book, there's a prologue to the epilogue that is a deleted scene where after Hayden...
November.
So it is later.
November 2018. It says it takes place 3 weeks before the epilogue in Heated Rivalry, and the epilogue takes place 16 months after they're at the cottage. So a year and a half after.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's quite a jump.
Yeah. So even that's too much of a jump. But for those of you who haven't read the book and the epilogue, Hayden guesses that the, like, secret person is Ilia. Jokingly, but he ends up being right. Stumbles into that, and then they have a dinner with them, and so we thought about maybe that they open with that, but that's too much time. So I think that they end up back at the cottage, and like it's not warm anymore. Like the fire's gone out, and like he's looking at the cold moon on the lake instead of the sun, and he's like flipping out.
So you think that they drive home and they don't pick up exactly like how the book does, where they get back to the house and Shane's freaking out and has to go outside to get air, and Ilia gives him a glass of vodka, and they just like hash it out?
Yeah, no, I think that they'll have to do a little bit of bridging from the euphoria of the car to that. But yeah, I think that they could just open back up on that.
And then how do you think the resolution of that ends? Because in the book, they talk about like getting engaged, and I think it would be kind of impactful if they had Shane freaking out, Ilia once again talking him down, preventing him from having a panic attack, or talking him through a panic attack if he has one, because he's very stressed out in the book version. And then they start talking about the future, and Ilia at that point in the book is so elated that he just had this day with him that he is like dreamily talking about the future, and it calms Shane into talking about it alongside him. Like it alleviates a lot of his anxieties, because Ilia now is so forthright with how ready and prepared he is to face the adversity that Shane's freaking out about. And they have this like nice resolution by the end of it where they talk about getting engaged on the dock, and that's like a great mirror moment that they can pay off later on in season 2. So again, I'm thinking about it in terms of like constructing an overarching narrative where in season 1 we have so many moments where they do a visual callback or a narrative one by the end of the finale. And so if you remove that conversation about proposing, then the proposal doesn't have as big of an impact. So I think that has to be in there. And then maybe we just like fade to black and then they jump.
Yeah, for sure. I do think one problem there is that there is no dock because of budget. Yeah. So either they're getting engaged on that rock, or
in the yard.
Yeah.
They also have a very important conversation about who they're going to tell, which I think is really prevalent for what is going to happen in the long game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are worse things than going back to the cottage.
Seriously. But I do wonder, because in the book they do just kind of jump 16 months later, and in the epilogue Hayden already knows, even though the dinner scene isn't in the original source material. I think they kind of have to include that, because him coming out to anyone other than Ilia is so important, and he's already done it with Rose and now his parents, but this is someone in hockey. I feel like you can't not show that conversation on screen.
100%.
And then therefore you have to have this dinner, because you and we were talking about what happens in the dinner scene, and to me it should have been in the book because it's so important what happens in that scene. I don't think Jacob could get away with not including it,
or would want to.
Yeah, it's a great excerpt that she added.
Phenomenal, and also gives time to that relationship between Shane and Hayden that we haven't gotten really to see yet. And I think within that scene we realize as readers like how similar the dynamic for Hayden and Shane is to Ilia and Shane, in the sense that Hayden comes off as never serious and not particularly plugged in, but when he is confronting Ilia, it becomes clear how closely he does pay attention to Shane and his needs, and
cares about him.
Well, and one of the things that Shane needs is someone who isn't serious to get him out of his head. So I think that showing that relationship that Shane spends so much time on is so crucial.
Yeah. And we know Jacob plans to talk about when Shane comes out to his team. So I think if you don't beef up the relationship dynamic between him and Hayden ahead of that moment when Hayden is the only person in that room to come to his defense, again, it just adds more context and weight to him coming to Shane's aid in that scene that maybe wouldn't feel as significant if we don't have more time. Also with Hayden, like, firsthand witnessing how Shane is in a partnership, because he's never been with anybody really except for Rose, but I don't see Hayden with him and like we don't see him around that relationship. So it will be interesting to watch Hayden observe Shane's behavior, and in the long game they spend a lot of time together, like the three of them. So yeah, I think you kind of really have to dedicate a good chunk of a scene to that dinner scene.
For sure. And this is not a question, this is my own question. And you kind of already dashed my hopes last night, but for the people in the back, do we think that Jacob is going to leave it where every Metro sucks when Shane comes out?
That's a good question.
Because there's a little bit of a, like, Schitt's Creek mentality of, like, show the behavior that you want to see in the world. And obviously, like, that would change a lot of plot, so it's not going to be 100%. But just look at those smiling faces at the playoff viewing party. And I'm like, they're all going to suck that much?
Yeah, no, I think it's less of they're all going to suck. It's more of a lot of them are going to just be quiet.
Yeah, bystander.
Yeah, I think it's more of that. Because the point that you're making about the Schitt's Creek angle, that's Ilya's team. They're doing that.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to have Shane's team represent the old guard that they've been building up in the background. Because again, in season 1, they do not go into the hockey culture very deep. This team is going to be the way that they do it in season 2. And if you soften that, then everything that Shane and Ilia have been resisting for 10 years doesn't hold any weight.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to keep it so that their reaction is true to
validated,
real hockey culture.
Yeah, and I understand that.
I think that JJ also has to be having the reaction he does in the book where it's just so poor, because they've really teed that up already in season 1 where he says
to me.
Yeah, Lo was watching it yesterday and didn't realize that JJ had already started saying
slurs.
Obvious slurs. So that lines up with how he's going to react in season 2. And a lot of it mirrors back to what we were saying about Ilia, which is that when he's afraid or hurt, he's terrible. JJ reacts terribly because he's so hurt that Shane didn't share this with him. And that is how he frames all of his, like, how he handles this situation. He's really mean to Shane about it. And then when they finally converse, he says it's because he's so hurt that he let Shane, or he was trying to set Shane up with people, and Shane let him do that, and it made him feel like he was aware of, like, the inner world that Shane was sharing with him, and then to find out that the entire time he's known him, he's been lying. So it makes him question, what else have you lied to me about? Like, the anger that he feels and the betrayal is why he reacts the way he does. And then Shane does a good job of calling out that, like, that's a terrible way to...
Well, God forbid you think about what in his actions
made him lie. And I think that that's a really important conversation. And I think the inkling of most people is like, well, don't make him that horrible. But you can't make Shane's point obvious without him being the stereotypical, make it about you, and completely denounce Shane's feelings being a factor as to why he lied to you.
Yeah, okay. I'll just have to steel my heart. But it will be interesting because they do gloss over the Metros in the book.
Yeah, very much so.
So I'm really excited.
I'm glad he's leaning into it.
Yeah, because, it's kind of the whole point.
We also need to include the press conference that they have where they announce the foundation. and it's the first time that they're like publicly friendly with one another. And Hayden's in that scene. He's important because he's like guarding the bathroom door when the two of them are getting ready for it. They also announced that Una is in charge of that foundation. So I think that there's going to probably be a lot of really fun opportunities for Jacob to add scenes that we don't get in the book, where Una and Ilia and Shane are planning this launch. You know, I feel like there's just got to be more context added to the show and scenes added into the show to help soften the 16-month jump that we're gonna have. Like, if we don't have a solid footing of where they are before the jump, it will feel very jarring to me.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any other like loose ends in season 1 that...
Well, it's the last... Well, this isn't a season 1 thing, but in the time between the end of the book and the epilogue, the jump, it's Ilia's last season with Boston, and they know that. So we don't have any clue as to how he announced he's leaving, what the backlash was with Boston fans, how he told that. Like, we don't get any insight into that.
Hockey culture.
Yeah, that is a huge thing that I really hope that they touch on, because that would not be received well, and it would be fascinating how that all unfolds. And we never really hear about it except for one time in the long game when they're playing against Boston and he's getting booed, and he tells one of his teammates they wish I still played for them, and that's about it. So I feel like that would be kind of a missed opportunity for the hockey culture piece that they're trying to plug in.
And if anyone needs a real life example of Boston losing their captain, CC Brad Marchand.
Yeah, that one hurt. But that one he didn't choose to leave.
I know. I'm just saying. I'm not saying we hold him responsible.
No, I'm saying, like, think about that. The reaction that Boston had to someone leaving who didn't want to, and that it being so for
emotional.
Months, everyone was like deeply, deeply affected by it. Now imagine that he chose to leave.
Yeah. No. We'd burn the ships.
Yeah. It would be catastrophic. The draft pick, you know, it's just, there's so much there to unpack.
And it is foreshadowed by Una.
Total.
They drafted him.
Yeah. Loyalty, all of it. All very relevant for what they're going to deal with in season 2.
I think that we could like have a whole season 2 episode, so I think we should control ourselves.
Okay. We'll plan on doing that, guys. We'll do a season 2 episode. Our thoughts and predictions and what we want them to include that maybe isn't obvious.
Because I haven't even uttered Svetlana's name.
Which I've done a video on TikTok about her, but I will say that video was born of a conversation with Lo.
Yeah, that was CC me.
Yeah, so I want her to have a platform to share her thoughts and opinions on that, because, yeah, you have so many great takes and so many unbelievable observations about her, because you are someone who I think is looking at the hockey culture of it all from a very different lens than me. You pick up on things that I don't, because I'm too inside of it.
100%.
And she's kind of in the same boat where she's on the outside of it, but very familiar with how it works as the daughter of a player.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, Svetlana.
We love you.
We love you. So cool.
Okay, we'll do the last question. This question is, in episode 2, during the montage that shows the passage of time, what do you think Shane was texting when he started to type, I think you should, ... and then deletes it to Ilia? So for context, this is when, in the montage, Shane is sitting on the couch. It looks like he's at his parents' cottage. And
playoffs are happening.
The playoffs are happening. He's watching playoffs on TV. Ilia texts, playoffs are fun. How come you aren't here? So classic jab. And then Shane replies, fuck you, quote, Lily. And Ilia replies with a kissy face. And then Shane says, and see you next year, asshole. And Ilia says, promise? I still want that asshole. And yes is proper grammar. And that's when Shane visibly panics, types out, I think that you should, and then deletes it and puts his phone away.
Yes. And it is a lot of Hudson's incredible face acting. Oh, yeah. Yes. And like his face drops and he it's panic. And then he like tosses his phone. Like he looks away. Like he can't even stay in the moment. So I didn't catch any of that until we watched it looking for that.
His face?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just like never looked at his face.
Well,
that
and
way.
also to circle back to the first question, this is happening when he's actively trying to not engage with it, you know, like this is when they're
he's still rebuffing him.
Yeah, this is another example of when he's like resisting Ilya's advances. So I think that's important to remember too. They're not hooking up. So Ilia being this forward in this whole montage is he's having to practice immense self-control to not give into it. And then we see in the scene after the montage ends, and I just said this to you, Ilia texts him before the game, which feels like a break in the typical pattern they've established. And for whatever reason, that's the correspondence that Shane gives in with.
Yeah.
And they meet up after that game.
Because I think that he almost like stops taking it seriously, just gets into the habit of rebuffing him. Because like Ilia is like that, he's not serious, he's whatever, and so it jars him out of that rut, and
he wants it the whole time.
Yes, he does.
he sure wants it. To answer the question though, I think that you should ... I think it would have been something very literal, because Shane at this point is still so literal with all his responses. Earlier on in these first 2 episodes, he always calls him asshole or fuck you, or like he's very deflective, and he doesn't give an answer that's true at all. And he's trying to divert things often. So this has stumped me because I really don't know what in that situation you could fill it in with specifically, given that this is like a 2-second snapshot of him sitting on a couch, and I don't have any other context of like what's going on between them at that point in time. I almost want to say he thinks like, I think that you should get that look like that. This doesn't make sense, but like something like get that looked at, like you want this so bad but I'm not giving it to you, so you should go deal with it somewhere else kind of thing.
I was gonna say either he writes that because it's like a good intro to a dismissive comment, and he realizes he doesn't actually have anything
one
to say. But then I've thought of a couple while we've been talking.
Okay, good.
And so I think one of them would be like, I think that you should get your head out of my ass. Or I think that that's where it's going. Like, I don't think he's going to be like, I think that you should leave me the fuck alone. Like,
no.
So I think it's either something like that, or in which case, like...
Because he can be funny.
Yeah, he absolutely can be funny.
And Ilia thinks he's hilarious. But I think his humor is when he's being wholesomely honest.
Yeah.
Ilia finds that most endearing. So I think that's why my knee-jerk reaction is that he would say something honest.
Yeah, I thought of the other one I was going to say is he could say, like, I think that you should focus
on the playoffs.
Yeah, more on the playoffs and less on my asshole. Or something like that.
I love that.
But that doesn't really account for why he doesn't send it, if those are like... And that's why I think maybe he's panicking to the point that he can't think of those, and that's why he doesn't send anything. That's a device that's used multiple times, is that he will write something and delete it over and over, and he does it in the scene that follows this when they're in the locker room, and Ilia says, how many times can you come in 1 hour? He types something out and deletes it twice before he says, I don't know, twice maybe. And that's him again, like, he was going to be literal, he was going to be dismissive, he was going to redirect, and then he gives in and does what he doesn't do in this scene, which is send the message that's honest. So I think, like, having him delete this is really important, because then we see what happens when he follows through. As soon as he follows through, he gives in altogether and says, I'll text you after the game, and then we see them together. So I think he knows himself well enough to not send the message, because this is what would happen. Also, maybe they think he's having fun, like just bantering with Ilia, and then Ilia brings it back to something that makes Shane feel vulnerable. And that's like why it changes for him. And being desired by Ilia is what makes him feel vulnerable.
That's a big thing in the book. Even though they sleep together or they have sex sooner, the lead up to those 2 weeks in between, he like quite literally can't believe that Ilya Rozanov would want to have sex with him, and the thought of it is like crippling.
There you go.
So if it's 2 years of him feeling that way,
yeah,
can you imagine?
There you
go. No wonder he's a ball of mush.
Look at that. We've solved it. If they had been hooking up more consistently and it wasn't montaged in this rebuffing, we would have seen more. Hudson would have had more opportunities to convey that Shane can't believe that Ilia wants to have sex with him. It wouldn't just be this one adept viewer asking a couple of other obsessive viewers to interpret a 2-second, but I digress from my soapbox.
I think it's amazing that people are consuming the show in this way, that we're answering a question about another text message that never gets sent.
Yeah.
And can put that much weight to it.
Yeah.
Given how well written everything else
and well
is.
acted.
Yeah.
Like, it's only because he demonstrates the panic
that we have any insight.
Able to even go off of that.
Yep.
And so the thesis is give them more money and more time and more episodes.
It doesn't sound like we're getting that, but I'm holding out hope. I also really want them to do some sort of an episode in between now and season 2, but I'm not holding out hope for that either. But we know that they filmed a lot that didn't get included.
That's a whole episode.
I
have a list of demands.
Okay. So we'll do another one for that.
Absolutely. But I will say I have less hope for an in-between episode after discussing where they're going to pick back up. Like, if they pick up back at the cottage, it doesn't make any sense for them to do an in-between episode.
Yeah.
But
well, they could do, it depends on if they want to film something with everybody or just Shane and Ilia. Mm-hmm. Because you could fill in the gap of what they do for the rest of the 2 weeks they're there now that the parents know, and just have the 4 of them have a scene together, and that would have been something I would watch. I would watch anything. Who am I kidding? But
yeah, but that is very true. Kind of like when Euphoria, like Hunter Schafer wrote those episodes of Euphoria. Yep. Another incredible piece of television.
Well, we're going to end the Q&A there because we're well over an hour. Thank you, as always, if you've made it to the end, for listening. We are going to have a few other more specific episodes coming out, deep diving into some other topics and ideas that kind of formulated while going through a lot of these Q&A questions. So thank you again to everyone who submitted a question and sent me a message with your insights and opinions, because so much of what we've been able to discuss has been, at least on my end, like spawned from someone bringing something up in my inbox, which is really fun.
Absolutely. And that's on Discourse.
It is. That is on Discourse. So we will see you in the next one, and thank you again for listening.
Bye now.